Seconds before I was about to sign the final consent papers for the kidney transplant, my world froze. My sister was lying on the hospital bed, pale and frail, her life depending on my decision. My daughter stood at the edge of the room, her hands trembling, her lips quivering as if she was holding back a storm. Then, with tears in her eyes, she whispered words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Mom, you can't do this. She doesn't deserve your kidney. You don't know what she did to me." My pen slipped from my hand. The room, once filled with the beeping of machines and the low hum of nurses walking by, suddenly grew louder in my ears, as if every sound was pressing against me. My heart thumped so hard I could barely breathe. My sister looked at my daughter with a strange mix of fear and anger, while my daughter's voice grew stronger. "If you save her, you'll be saving the person who destroyed my life." I had come prepared to give away a piece of my body, a sacrifice I thought was born out of love and loyalty. But in that single moment, loyalty twisted into doubt. What secret was my daughter carrying that was so dark, so heavy, that she chose this exact second to spill it? The decision that once seemed simple, save my sister's life, suddenly turned into a battlefield between truth, betrayal, and blood ties. And as I looked at my daughter's tear-stained face, I realized this was no longer just about a kidney. This was about survival, but not the kind measured in heartbeats or hospital machines. This was survival of trust, of family, of everything I thought I believed in. I never thought my life would come down to a single decision scribbled on a line of paper in a sterile hospital room. If anyone had asked me years ago whether I would give my kidney to my sister, I would have laughed and said yes without hesitation. That was the kind of bond Layla and I had, or at least the bond one thought we had. We were sisters, born only 2 years apart, raised under the same roof, eating from the same plates when food was scarce, holding each other's hands when storms rattled the windows of our childhood home. She had always been the fragile one, prone to sickness, missing school often, while I carried her books and made sure her homework was done. Our parents leaned on me to protect her, to shield her, and I grew into that role without ever questioning it. It became my identity. Layla's protector. Even as we grew older, when life scattered us into marriages, jobs, and the busyness of adulthood, the thread of responsibility never left my chest. And when the doctor said she needed a kidney to live, I didn't hesitate. How could I? She was my sister. The weeks leading up to the surgery were a blur of appointments, tests, signatures, and hushed conversations with doctors who explained risks in careful, measured tones. I tuned most of it out. Risks didn't matter. Pain didn't matter. What mattered was Layla's life, and if I could give it to her, then that was what I would do. Emma, my daughter, stood by me during these weeks, though I noticed something strange in her silence. She was supportive, but her eyes carried a weight I didn't recognize. First, I chalked it up to worry. She was only 19, still trying to find her place in the world, and now she had to watch her mother prepare for major surgery. I hugged her often, told her everything would be fine, reassured her that I was strong and brave and that Layla needed me. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. I saw it and ignored it, too focused on my mission of saving my sister to notice that something much darker was brewing inside my only child. The morning of the surgery, the hospital was buzzing with the ordinary rhythm of emergencies. Nurses in pale scrubs rolled carts down hallways. Voices called out codes and instructions. The smell of antiseptic stung my nose. My sister's room was dim, the blinds half closed, machines quietly beeping as they measured her fragile heartbeat and the oxygen flowing into her lungs. Layla looked so small beneath the sheets, her skin nearly translucent, veins blue against her thin arms. She smiled when I entered, and for a moment I felt proud to be the one who would give her another chance at life. "You're my angel," she whispered, her voice weak, and I squeezed her hand with a brave smile. I didn't see the flicker of fear in her eyes when she looked past me to where Emma stood, rigid at the doorframe. The nurse handed me the final set of papers to sign, the ones that made everything official. The pen felt heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have been. I read the words again, donor consent. It was such a simple phrase for something so monumental. I was about to give away a part of myself. But I had never doubted this choice, not once. I glanced back at Emma, hoping for her smile, hoping to see pride in her face. Instead, her lips were trembling, her fists clenched at her sides. Her eyes were wide, filled with unshed tears. Something in my chest tightened. I opened my mouth to tell her it was okay, but before I could, her voice broke through the sterile air, soft but sharp enough to slice through my resolve. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You can't do this." The pen slipped in my fingers. I blinked, unsure I had heard her right. Emma had always been quiet, respectful, never one to raise her voice against me. For her to interrupt me here, now, in this room where life and death balanced on a fragile line, it didn't make sense. I turned to her, searching her face for clarity. "Sweetheart, it's okay. I'll be fine. Your aunt needs this." But Emma shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, Mum. You don't understand. You can't give her your kidney. She doesn't deserve it." Her voice cracked on the last words, and the room seemed to tilt beneath me. Layla's pale face darkened, her eyes narrowing, and she whispered sharply, "Emma, stop." My heart stumbled. My eyes darted between them, confusion flooding me. The air grew thick, suffocating. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Emma, what do you mean she doesn't deserve it?" Emma's sobs came harder now, her chest heaving, her voice breaking as years of silence shattered all at once. "She ruined my life, Mom. She hurt me in ways you don't know. She's not who you think she is." The room fell into silence, except for the rhythmic beeping of the machines and the sound of Emma's tears hitting the sterile floor. My grip on the pen loosened, and it clattered onto the paperwork, leaving a tiny streak of ink across the signature line. My mind spun in circles, trying to catch up with the words my daughter had just thrown into the air. Layla looked stricken, pale not from illness but from fear. Her lips pressed tightly together as if holding back secrets she had buried deep. I stared at my daughter, my sweet Emma, who had always trusted me, always leaned on me, always been my reason for breathing. And now she was standing there, her body trembling with the weight of a truth she had carried alone for years. A truth that had finally burst free in the one moment when everything depended on silence. Could barely breathe. My chest felt heavy, my pulse thundering in my ears. I wanted to demand answers, to shake the truth from both of them, but all I could do was stand frozen, the consent form staring up at me like a cruel reminder of what I was about to do. Everything I thought I knew about family, about loyalty, about sacrifice, cracked beneath me like thin glass. And as Emma's broken voice echoed again, "Please, Mom, don't save her," I realized that this was no longer just about my kidney. This was about something far deeper, far darker, and far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The silence after Emma's words was deafening, thick enough to choke me. My fingers hovered uselessly above the fallen pen as if touching it again might burn me. My mind screamed for clarity, but the room seemed suspended in a nightmare I couldn't shake awake from. Emma's cheeks were wet with tears, her shoulders trembling. Her eyes locked on me as though pleading with me to finally see what she had hidden for so long. Layla's breathing quickened, her chest rising and falling under the thin hospital blanket, her eyes darting between us with a wild desperation. I knew my sister's face better than anyone, and yet at that moment, I saw something in her I had never seen before. Panic, the kind born not from illness, but from being cornered. I swallowed hard, my voice cracking as I forced the words out. "Emma. Sweetheart, what are you talking about? What did she do?" My heart begged for her to say something minor, something I could fix, something that would explain away the raw terror in her tone. But deep down, something colder whispered that it was worse than anything I was prepared to hear. Layla shifted in the bed, her frail arms trembling as she reached out, as if to command silence with a gesture. "Don't, Emma," she rasped, her voice thin but urgent. "Not now. Please." Emma's face twisted with fury, and she pointed at Layla, her voice breaking like glass. "Don't you dare tell me to stop. You stole my voice once, you don't get to silence me again." Her words hit me like blows. I looked between them, my chest aching as I tried to reconcile the image of my sickly sister with the monster my daughter's words painted. Emma, I whispered, my throat tight. Please just tell me. Whatever it is, we'll face it. Emma's body seemed to collapse under the weight of memory. She covered her face with her hands, her sobs muffled but raw, and when she spoke, her voice was so fragile I could barely hear it. She threatened me, Mom. She used me. I was only 16. She knew things about me, about my life, and she made me feel trapped. I was scared, I didn't know how to tell you, and I thought if I kept quiet, it would go away. But it never did. It only got worse. The blood drained from my face. My stomach lurched as if the ground had tilted. My sister, the one I was about to give my kidney to, had somehow hurt my daughter so deeply that Emma still shook years later. My hand pressed against my chest, desperate to hold in the storm of emotions breaking loose inside me. What do you mean she threatened you? My voice was trembling, begging for specifics I wasn't sure I wanted. Layla's face was a mask of horror and guilt. She shook her head furiously, her eyes brimming with tears. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's young, Stop lying. Emma's scream cut through the air, sharp enough to silence even the hum of the machines in my ears. You ruined everything. You pretended to be family while you twisted my life behind Mom's back. Do you remember that night when you told me if I didn't do what you asked, you'd tell everyone my secret? Do you remember how terrified I was? Her body trembled violently as she spoke, her words spilling out in sobs, and my heart clenched as pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed began to form. I turned to Layla, my voice cold now, sharp with a fury I had never felt before. Is this true? What did you do to her? Layla's lips quivered, her hands clutching at the blanket as though it could shield her. I was desperate, she whispered finally, her voice thin as paper. I made mistakes, I said things I shouldn't have. But I was sick even then, you know that. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just needed help. She trailed off, her excuses falling flat, dissolving in the weight of Emma's tears. My knees buckled, and I sank into the chair by the bed, my body shaking. For years, I had carried guilt that Emma was too quiet, too withdrawn, that maybe I hadn't been enough for her as a single mother trying to do everything alone. Now I realized she had been carrying this burden, silenced by the very person I had been trying to save. Rage surged inside me. Rage at Layla, rage at myself for being blind, rage at the world for being so cruel to my daughter. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered to Emma, reaching for her trembling hands. Her tear-streaked face lifted to mine, her eyes shattered with pain. Because I knew you loved her more. I thought if I told you, you'd choose her over me. And I couldn't lose you, Mom. I couldn't. Her words split me open. The realization that my daughter had doubted my love so deeply that she chose silence over truth shattered me in ways I never imagined possible. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight, her sobs shaking us both. No, I whispered fiercely into her hair. Never. I would never choose anyone over you. You are my everything, Emma. My everything. But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. Hadn't I already chosen? Wasn't I sitting here, papers signed, ready to carve a piece of myself out for Layla, while my daughter stood in the shadows unheard? The guilt was unbearable. Layla sobbed quietly in the bed, her thin shoulders shaking. I didn't mean for it to go so far. I was scared too. I didn't think she'd. She buried her face in her hands, her words muffled. Emma pulled away from me, her eyes blazing. Stop pretending to be the victim. You knew exactly what you were doing. You made me feel worthless, like I was trapped. I'll never forgive you for that. I looked between them, my heart torn to pieces. One sister begging for her life. One daughter begging me not to save the woman who had destroyed hers. The walls of the hospital seemed to close in, the beeping machines mocking me with their rhythm of life and death. The nurse peeked in, asking softly if I had signed the papers. I shook my head, unable to form words, and she retreated quietly, leaving us drowning in the storm of truth. I sat there for what felt like hours, holding Emma's hand, listening to her broken sobs, while Layla lay curled in her bed, her tears falling silently. The choice that once seemed so clear now felt like a dagger splitting me in two. How could I save my sister knowing she had destroyed my daughter's spirit? How could I look into Emma's eyes ever again if I put Layla's life above hers? Yet how could I walk away from my sister, knowing she might die without me? That night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the world outside fell quiet, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. The truth had been spoken, and it hung heavy in the air between us. Tomorrow they would ask me again to sign. And tomorrow I would have to decide not just who lived, but who I really was, a sister or a mother. The next morning, I woke in the stiff hospital chair with my neck aching and my heart heavier than it had ever been. The dim hallway light spilled in through the crack under the door, casting a pale glow across the room where both my daughter and my sister slept, or at least pretended to. Emma had finally cried herself into a restless slumber, her head resting on my lap, her breath uneven. Layla lay turned toward the wall, her body still, but I knew she wasn't asleep. Too much had been said for either of us to find rest. My body felt split in half, torn between the woman who shared my blood and the young girl who shared my soul. I stroked Emma's hair gently, my mind racing with questions I was too afraid to ask. What exactly had my sister done to her? What secret had been buried so deep that it only clawed its way out when death was at our door? The hours crawled by until morning light filled the room. Emma stirred, her swollen eyes blinking open. She looked at me with exhaustion, guilt, and fear etched across her face. My hand cupped her cheek and I whispered, "You don't have to hold back anymore. Tell me everything." My voice shook, not because I didn't want the truth, but because I feared what it would do to us once it was spoken aloud. Emma sat up slowly, her hands twisting in her lap. She glanced toward Layla, who still lay motionless on the bed. Then she took a deep breath and finally began. "It was 2 years ago. You remember when you worked those extra shifts? You were gone a lot, trying to save up for my college." I nodded slowly, my chest tightening, already sensing where this was going. I used to go over to Aunt Layla's after school sometimes. First it was fine. She would talk to me, make me tea, act like she cared. But then one day she found out something about me. Something I hadn't even told you yet. Her voice faltered, her fingers digging into her palms. She saw messages on my phone. Private messages between me and a friend. She knew things about me I wasn't ready to share with anyone, not even you. Felt my pulse quicken. "So she blackmailed you?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Yes. She said if I didn't do what she asked, she would tell everyone. She would tell you, tell Dad, even tell the school. I was terrified, Mom. I didn't want to disappoint you, I didn't want you to hate me, so I listened to her. She made me run errands for her, lie for her, even cover up things she was doing. She said if I ever told you, she would destroy me." Her voice cracked, and she clutched at her chest. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every day, I was scared of what she might do. I stopped sleeping. I stopped trusting anyone. And you never knew. Because I couldn't tell you. Because she made me believe you would choose her over me. Tears streamed down my face before I realized it. The weight of her words crushed me, each syllable carving guilt deeper into my bones. My poor Emma, carrying that kind of fear in silence while I was blind to it all. I looked over at Layla, my hands trembling with rage. "Is it true?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. "Did you threaten my daughter? Did you use her like that?" Layla slowly turned her head, her face pale but her eyes burning with a strange mix of shame and defiance. "I was desperate," she whispered hoarsely. "You think it's easy being sick all the time, watching life slip through your fingers while everyone else moves on. I didn't mean to hurt her. I needed someone. And she was there." My stomach twisted. "She was a child, Layla. My child. You took her innocence, her trust, and you shattered it. And you dare call that desperation?" My voice shook with fury. Emma flinched at the sharpness of my words, but Layla only began to cry, her thin hands clutching at the blanket. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know it would scar her like this. I thought she could handle it. I thought it was harmless." Harmless. The word exploded from me, bitter and raw. You call blackmailing a teenager harmless? You call stealing her peace of mind harmless? You don't get to decide what scars someone carries. My chest heaved as anger burned through me, an anger so fierce it frightened even me. Emma pressed her face into my shoulder, her tears hot against my skin. I tried to forgive her, Mom. I tried to move past it. But every time I saw her it came back. The fear, the shame, the lies. And then when I heard you were going to give her your kidney, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I couldn't watch you save the person who broke me. Her words carved into me, forcing me to confront the brutal reality. Saving my sister meant betraying my daughter all over again. My entire life, I had believed loyalty to family was unshakable, that blood was everything. But what happens when blood betrays you? What happens when the person you've sworn to protect becomes the very source of your pain? Layla's sobs filled the room, but I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at the woman who had twisted my daughter's life in the shadows while I remained blissfully unaware. All I could see was Emma, the years of silence in her eyes, the quiet sadness I had mistaken for normal teenage angst, the countless nights she must have cried alone. I pulled her close, whispering fiercely, "You should never have been afraid of me. I love you more than anything in this world. You are my reason for everything." She clung to me as though my words were the lifeline she had been waiting years to grasp. And I knew in that moment that my choice was already made, though the world would call it cruel. I couldn't give my kidney to Layla. Not after this, not when it meant abandoning Emma once again. The door opened softly and a nurse stepped in, her expression polite but firm. "We need your decision soon," she said gently. "The surgical team is preparing." She glanced at the papers still unsigned, then at the three of us, sensing the tension but saying nothing more. When she left, the silence pressed down on us again. I stood, wiping my tears with trembling hands. I looked at Layla, and for the first time in my life, I saw her not as my sister but as a stranger. "You asked me to save you," I said quietly, "but you stole something from me I can never get back. You stole my daughter's trust, her peace, her childhood. How can you ask me for my life when you've already taken so much from hers?" Layla's face crumpled, but I didn't wait for her reply. I turned back to Emma, who looked at me with wide, desperate eyes, as if afraid I might still choose blood over love. I took her hands in mine and whispered, "I will not abandon you. Not again. My life belongs to you, not her." The decision settled in my bones, heavy but certain. Whatever happened next, there would be no turning back. Layla might never forgive me, the world might call me heartless, but I knew in my soul that the person who needed saving was sitting right in front of me, her broken spirit still struggling to heal. And for her, for Emma, I would walk away from anything, even my own sister. The day blurred into a storm of voices and footsteps, every moment heavy with the pressure of a choice that seemed impossible but had already been made in the quiet of my heart. Nurses moved in and out, reminding me with clipped politeness that the surgical team was waiting, that timing mattered, that lives depended on preparation. Their words twisted in my chest, echoing against the knowledge that one life, the one they spoke of saving, had already poisoned another beyond repair. I felt their eyes on me, impatient but careful not to push too hard, as if they knew something bigger than medicine was happening in that room. Emma sat close to me, her fingers laced tightly through mine, as though afraid I might slip away and sign the papers while she wasn't looking. Her body was still trembling, her face blotchy from crying, but there was a fierceness in her grip, a silent demand that I choose her, that I prove to her once and for all where my loyalty lay. I squeezed her hand gently, hoping she felt the answer in the way my pulse steadied against hers. Layla, on the other hand, had changed. The night before, she had wept quietly, her apologies faltering between sobs, but now something sharper had taken hold of her. She sat upright in the hospital bed, her frail frame stiff with desperation, her eyes wide with fury and fear. The fragility that had once softened her was gone, replaced with a raw, naked hunger for survival. She stared at me as though I were both her savior and executioner. "You can't do this," she rasped, her voice hoarse but fierce. "You can't just walk away. I'm your sister. Blood, remember. All those years, all that history. You're going to throw it away because of a misunderstanding." Emma flinched beside me, her hand tightening on mine. My heart surged with rage at Layla's words. A misunderstanding. That was what she dared to call it. I stood slowly, facing her, my voice trembling but firm. "This is not a misunderstanding, Layla. You broke my daughter. You blackmailed her, silenced her, made her believe she couldn't even trust her own mother. You don't get to erase that with a word." Layla shook her head violently, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "I was sick. I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was scared, and Emma—" "Don't you dare," Emma cut in, her voice sharp with a strength I had never heard before. She stood too, her small frame radiating fury. "Don't you dare say my name like you own it. You don't get to blame your sickness for the way you treated me. You knew exactly what you were doing. And you don't get to twist it now." The room grew thick with tension, every word slicing deeper than the last. I looked at Layla, this woman who had been my other half for so many years, and for the first time, I saw her not through the lens of sisterhood but as a stranger who had betrayed everything family was meant to mean. Her tears no longer moved me. They felt like weapons designed to claw at my guilt, to drag me back into the role of savior she had always assigned me. The doctor entered then, clipboard in hand, his voice calm but carrying an urgency that made my heart race. "We need your final answer," he said, his eyes flicking between the three of us, sensing but not fully grasping the storm brewing here. "If we don't move forward, we'll have to make other arrangements." Layla's eyes snapped to mine, pleading now, her voice breaking. "Please, don't let me die. I'm your sister, your only sister. Don't do this to me." She reached out with trembling hands, her desperation so raw it made my chest ache. But then I felt Emma's fingers tighten around mine again, grounding me, pulling me back from the edge of guilt. Her eyes were red and swollen, but steady as they locked onto mine. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Her whole body begged me for one thing, for once to choose her. I turned back to the doctor, my throat tight but my voice steady. "I'm not signing. I can't do it." The words hung in the air like a verdict. The doctor blinked, nodding slowly, his professional mask never faltering. "Understood," he said quietly, scribbling on his clipboard before excusing himself. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. Layla gasped, her hands clenching the blanket. "You can't mean that. You wouldn't let me die. Not after everything. You always protected me, always. You can't just stop now." Her voice cracked into a scream, a sound filled with rage and despair that rattled me to my core. I turned to her, my tears finally breaking free. "I protected you my whole life, Layla. I gave you everything I could. But I will not give you my daughter. Not again. You crossed a line I can never forgive. And if that means you hate me, so be it. But I won't sacrifice Emma to save you." Layla's sobs shook the room, her frail body trembling, her hands reaching for me one last time. But I couldn't move toward her. Emma clung to me, and I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from the storm. My heart broke as I listened to my sister's cries, but it didn't change the truth. My choice had been made, and I would live with it. The hours that followed were heavy with silence. Nurses came and went, checking Layla's vitals, offering sympathetic glances they didn't dare voice. Emma stayed close to me, her body slowly relaxing as if years of tension were finally unraveling, thread by thread. For the first time, she leaned against me without hesitation, her trust tentative but returning. Layla turned her face to the wall, refusing to look at us. Her sobs quieted, replaced with the sound of shallow, angry breaths. The bond we once shared had snapped, and though it tore me apart, I knew it could never be mended. Some wounds cut too deep to ever heal. That night, as I lay beside Emma on the narrow hospital cot, I thought of the years behind us. The laughter, the secrets, the promises whispered between sisters who thought nothing could break them. I thought of the little girls we once were, holding hands against the dark. And then I thought of my daughter, curled against me, the weight of her trust finally resting in my arms again. Family, I realized, isn't about blood. It's about love, safety, and trust. And in the battle between past loyalty and present truth, I had finally chosen right. My sister might never forgive me, the world might never understand, but as Emma's soft breaths rose and fell against my chest, I knew I would never regret choosing her. The days after my decision passed in a haze that felt both heavy and strangely freeing. For so long, my life had been tangled in Layla's needs, her crises, her constant pull on my loyalty. Now, after the choice had been spoken aloud, it was as though the air around me had shifted. The weight of her expectations no longer pressed against my chest, though the ache of what I had lost remained sharp. The hospital became quieter for us. No more rushing doctors urging me to sign, no more frantic calls to the surgical team. Instead, there was only waiting, the slow and inevitable ticking of time as Layla's body began to betray her. Emma stayed close during those days, as though afraid that at any moment I might slip back into the role of protector for my sister. She hovered near me in the hospital room, sometimes silent, sometimes speaking in short bursts about ordinary things. Her classes, her friends, the small details of her life that I had missed while she carried her secret alone. Every word she offered felt like a gift, a fragile piece of trust being laid carefully between us, brick by brick rebuilding what Layla had tried to shatter. I listened, soaking in every syllable, grateful for the chance to be her mother again in the truest sense. Layla's health declined faster than I had expected. Her skin grew pale, almost translucent, and her once bright eyes dulled with exhaustion and bitterness. She refused to speak to me at first, her silence a wall I could not break. At times she would look at Emma with a glare that chilled me, as if she blamed my daughter for her suffering. Other times she turned her face to the wall, shutting out both of us as if the betrayal had been hers to endure. I knew she hated me, but what surprised me was how much I mourned her even while she still lay breathing in the bed beside us. I had lost my sister long before her body began to give out, and that grief was a hollow ache I carried quietly. One evening, as the sun bled orange and gold through the hospital blinds, Emma and I sat by Layla's bed. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Layla stirred, her voice weak but clear. "You should have saved me," she whispered, her words slicing through the silence. "I would have saved you if it were the other way around." I swallowed hard, tears burning the corners of my eyes. "Maybe you believe that," I said softly. "But saving someone isn't about giving pieces of yourself away until you have nothing left. I saved the one person who had no one else to fight for her. My daughter needed me. And I won't apologize for choosing her." Layla's eyes filled with tears, though whether they were from sorrow or rage, I couldn't tell. She turned her face away, and that was the last real conversation we had. The next morning, her condition worsened. Doctors moved quickly, voices low but urgent, but there was nothing left to be done. I watched as my sister's life slipped quietly into the air around us, her chest rising and falling until it didn't anymore. The machines fell silent, and the room became unbearably still. Emma gripped my hand, her body trembling, and for a long time we stood there together, suspended in the moment between loss and release. Grief came in waves. It wasn't the same grief I had imagined before, the kind where you weep for a loved one who had given you joy. This grief was tangled, messy, filled with anger and regret. I cried for the little girls Layla and I once were, for the bond we had lost, for the years I spent blind to who she had become. But I didn't cry for the woman she turned into. That part of her had left me long before her body did. Emma surprised me in those days after the funeral. She was quiet, yes, but she carried herself with a strength I hadn't seen in her before. It was as if the truth had freed her too, allowing her to step out from under the shadow Layla had cast. One night, as we sat together at home, she leaned against me and whispered, "I thought you'd choose her. I was so sure I didn't matter as much. But you did choose me. You really did. Her words pierced me, not with pain, but with a fierce, overwhelming love. I held her close, my voice breaking as I said, "You are my heart, Emma. You always were. I'm sorry it took me so long to prove it." From then on, our healing became a slow, patient journey. We talked more, sometimes about hard things, sometimes about nothing at all. She began to laugh again, the sound hesitant at first but growing stronger each day. I found myself rediscovering her, seeing the young woman she was becoming beyond the scars Layla had left. We cooked together, we walked through the park. We rebuilt a rhythm that felt fragile but real. Still, Layla lingered in my thoughts. At night, I dreamed of her, sometimes as the sister I had loved, sometimes as the woman whose choices had torn us apart. I wondered if, in her final moments, she had understood my decision, or if she had carried her anger with her into the dark. I would never know, and maybe that was for the best. Some questions have no answers that can bring peace. What I did know was this: family is not measured by sacrifice alone. It is measured by love, by the way we protect the ones who trust us most. Layla had been my sister, but Emma was my child, my future, my reason to keep going. Choosing her wasn't betrayal. It was finally living up to the promise I made the day she was born, to put her above all else. Months later, as the seasons shifted and the sharpness of grief softened into memory, Emma and I visited Layla's grave. The grass was still new, the soil marked by the fresh sting of loss. Emma stood quietly, her hand tucked in mine, her expression unreadable. Finally she spoke, her voice steady. "I don't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm glad she's not in my head anymore." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone, Emma. You don't have to give it unless you want to. What matters is that you're free now." She looked up at me then, her eyes shining with a strength that made my chest ache with pride. For the first time in a long time, I saw not just the girl who had been hurt, but the woman she was becoming. Strong, brave, unbroken. As we walked away from the grave, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter than it had in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was ours to walk together. Layla's shadow no longer loomed between us. In the end, I had lost a sister, but I had saved my daughter. And in that truth, as painful and complicated as it was, I found a kind of peace. Life had forced me to choose, and though the choice had shattered one bond, it had mended another. As the sun set behind us, casting long golden light across the path, Emma slipped her arm through mine. For the first time in years I felt whole again, not because everything was healed but because we were healing together. And that was enough. Sparkles, if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful stories filled with drama and emotion.